Hey, all, it's David Ducker coming back at you, joined once again by the indomitable snowman, James Duffy. James, how do you feel about that nickname?
You really put me on the spot here. I don't know what I'm allowed to say on this website.
Oh, it's YouTube.
It's a
Hey,
fucking atrocious nickname.
Thank you.
It's an AIDS-infected cum bubble of a nickname. I harbor this distaste.
We'll not invite James back to the show.
I asked what I could say, and you said it was free game.
Moving forward, we're going to talk about GM burnout. I think I did a video on player burnout, but not GM burnout. I was actually challenged to do a video on GM burnout by another YouTube video maker, and he said we'll both do burnout videos. We'll mention each other, and we'll post them on the same day. Whoever gets the most hits wins. And I made mine, and he didn't make one. And that was 6 months ago, so I don't think he's going to make one. I keep bugging him about it, but so I can't even post that video, because in the video I'm like, I'm posting this at the same time as Buster, and we're going to see who gets the most vids. So I'm going to have a link. And I said all this, which is not true now that he let me down. Long story short, burnout is terrible. James, talk about burnout.
My burnout or DM burnout?
This friendship burnout? Talk about GM burnout.
Yeah. So in a previous video, we were talking about momentum, and one of the points I wanted to bring up is that DM burnout ties in very strongly with momentum. Ideally, you probably want to meet once a week or once every 2 weeks. Ideally, I'd lean closer to once every week, just because consistency is important. And if you have a day off within a 14-day cycle, you probably have a day off within a 7-day cycle as well. So with that structure, if you're meeting once every week, that means that the DM has to plan an effective session once every week. And then that can be really, really tough. Now, there's a lot of ways to avoid DM burnout, but the most effective way is to be interested in your campaign. And that begs a lot of your characters, but that's fine. You should have good characters, and there's tons of good characters available. Another thing that really, really rags in the DM is incomplete thoughts. Good planning is important.
Yeah. Excellent. So, so as you're saying, the scheduling can be important. Now, I would add to this, and I'd say that your game style can change that assumption. If you're running a railroad style, if you have to write a module for every session, then like you have to do so much work for every session that you're right. You have to think about, can I do a game every week, or does it take me 2 weeks to write a module? Or maybe I can write a module every week for 3 weeks, but week 4, 5, 6, 7, and I start to, the quality starts to drop sharply after week 3.
When you're younger and your kids are cooking dinner every night, and then suddenly they order pizza on Friday, and then on Tuesday they order Chinese food. You know what you're going to be eating on Friday. It's going to be pizza.
Yeah.
And next week, you don't know when. You don't know which day. But one of those days, you're going to have a lower quality meal. And the same thing sort of applies to campaign planning.
Yeah.
You can have 3 excellent sessions in a row. But if your DM gets tired and introduces one bad session, that means the next session is going to be sort of based on that lapse in their ability to plan appropriately and to implement what they want to see in their game. So it's important to take a break if you need it. You should never be afraid to take a break. If your campaign is getting to a point where you don't have anything planned and you don't know what's going to happen, you may say, I need help planning this. Do you guys have any ideas? Which is certainly a great thing to do. Your players are your resources. But you can also just say, look, guys, we're just not going to play this week. Again, that ties back into momentum. If you're going to do that next week, you have to play. It's your obligation. You can't order pizza every day of the week and expect your kids to survive or your budget to survive. if you start treating your game that way, things are going to go downhill 100%.
You're going to end up on TLC, World's Worst Diets, the girl who only eats French fries. It's going to be you. But that's an effective metaphor. That once you start to slack off, you're gonna slack off more next time and more next time. But what I was saying about styles is that if you are doing that modular style, the railroad, the one-shot style, you are inviting burnout. Please burn me,
Because it's weird.
But if you're coming in with a sandbox style, to me, it's so much easier to GM and to run it because instead of acting and forcing the players to act and forcing the players to react, you're just reacting to the players. I mean, you have to build the world in the sandbox, and that takes a lot of work. But after that, there's no more work. It might, so it might take me 100 hours to make the setting, and all the characters, the places, and the main story. But after that one is made, we just throw the players in, and whenever they just wander around, I just tell them what I've already done the work for, and then I just react to what they do. So your style can have a huge impact. Railroad will burn you out quicker. Sandbox, in my experience, much less burnout. But you do have to put in the forethought. Like instead of ordering the pizza at the last minute, if you go to the grocery store the day before, buy some groceries, forethought, and then you don't have to order pizza. To stick with the pizza metaphor. Any thoughts on that? On styles affecting burnouts?
No, I think you mentioned some good points there. Sandbox is definitely a little bit simpler than Railroad. If you are doing Railroad, you need to understand that you're going to be laying tracks down. If those tracks aren't there, your story's not going to go anywhere. If you're already laid a track forward and you get to a point where there are no tracks, there's going to be a derailment. And it's going to be bad.
Think about the Bugs Bunny cartoon where Bugs is in the front of the locomotive steaming along, and Bugs is laying the track down right in front of the locomotive. And then the track is all crooked and it's going up hills and down hills. And eventually, he runs the train right into a brick wall and explodes. Everyone dies. I believe Bugs Bunny died that way. But you don't want to do that. Do the sandbox. So it is more work for you up front. But in the long run, it's so much less work. And especially session to session. So much less work. So that's my number one tip for avoiding burnout is choose your styles. Or if you're running that railroad, just write all of the modules. Write a whole adventure path ahead of time before you even start. So you don't have to do any work between sessions. If that means that instead of starting the campaign in August, you start in November, that's okay because then you can run it straight, beginning, middle, end, momentum, the end, and now you can start writing again for your next railroad adventure. That's fine. It's perfectly legit.
Yeah.
So now my other big piece of advice for avoiding GM burnout is have good players. Bad players burn you out. Good players do the work for you. I always say if you got 7 people at the table, everyone should do 1/7 of the work. And that way no one will get burned out. Everyone will be entertained. And the setting and the story will be so much richer, up to 7 times as much richness. So for me, that's, get the players to have a backstory for you, to have goals, to have places they've been to, and places they want to go to, people they've met in their life, people they want to meet in their life. And then each player has kind of made their own mini sandbox, and they just need to kind of slide together. And now it's like you've got 7 people doing the prep. And even though only one of them is running them through that sandbox, 7 people built the sandbox. So it's huge, and it's detailed, and it's rich. It's awesome. So James, why don't you tell us some more about how players can help prevent burnout, or how GMs can force their players to help them avoid burnout, or anything like that?
You mentioned having a goal.
Yeah.
It is very important that your character be well designed and that you have some character motives. Now, if you're lazy, and I could understand like tons of reasons why you might be when designing a character, you may think that if you don't put in much effort, that things are going to be easier for you. Like nothing could be further from the truth. If you're a character and you're sitting with a party and they're trying to make a decision, your ability to influence that decision is going to be approaching zero if you haven't put in the work to actually design your character. And that means that at that time, when you're trying to have fun with your friends in your social group, that you're going to sort of make a fool of yourself. Because you're going to be scrambling to think of something that makes sense or something that's fun for you. And suddenly, you're actually not having fun playing the game anymore. You're struggling to think of like odd things you could do to make your character make sense. And like that's your responsibility, but you should have done it earlier. I mean, if you had done it earlier, you'd be having fun right now instead of trying to figure out why the fuck doesn't my character make any sense and how can I make him make sense instantly. The thing is, you can't. You have to put in that work, and if you do, you'll have lots of fun because you're going to be interested in what's going on. Your character motive is going to become your motive, and you're going to be motivated to do things within the campaign. It also takes a bit of pressure off the DM because now you're making decisions instead of you constantly reacting to what the DM is doing. That's really nice as well because you're not like under the DM's thumb. I've had campaigns that were unenjoyable because they were railroaded. They wanted us to go fight this, like he was a bull-riding man who dual-wielded great swords. My character has no interest in that. That is a deadly
That
thing.
sounds like a man to join.
Yeah, exactly. That guy is in
Fight
charge.
that guy. I'll pledge my loyalty to him.
Yeah. And he wanted us to contest his character.
Yeah,
And I didn't want to contest his character, and several other party members didn't want to contest the character either. So it's important that you be flexible as a DM as well. Like you can railroad things and you can sandbox things, but you need to have sort of a balance of both. If you want to tell a good story, some things are going to be a little bit more muscled in than others, because otherwise it's just too open. Now, I don't necessarily agree with that. I do think that you can do total sandbox realistically well. But that requires more player investment because it's going to be run by the player motives and things like that rather than the DM's intention.
Excellent. I did want to also add, I can think of a time when I burned a GM to a crisp because he was running a sandbox, but he'd done no prep. So we're walking through the world, and my character is he's got ranks in knowledge history, knowledge local, and geography and nature. So we're walking through the world, and we come up to the city, and I'm just like, oh, what does the city look like, GM? And he's like, he just starts describing it. It's clearly on the fly. He's like writing furiously. He's writing what he just said, and I'm like, oh, that's interesting. So it's got this architecture, and it's made of these materials, and the layout's like this. And like, okay, what's the history of the city? Who built it? Who lives here? What gods do they worship? And you know, what's the ruling noble family? What's their thieves guild called? How do they feel about wizards in this city? Because I've got knowledge. I'm like a lore master. I know all of this stuff. My character knows all this stuff, but the GM doesn't. So he's got to make it all on the fly, on the spot. And he burned to a crisp. He is like burst into flames. That boy. Because it's not just like the one city. His campaign was like a travel campaign. We went through multiple cities. And every city we got to, I was hitting him with the same questions. Because I had the same ranks. Because I wanted to know. Because my character was involved with the church. And he hated the Thieves Guild. And he didn't like wizards. And he was involved with nobles. All these people I'm connected to. So if the GM had prepared, you know, I would have been right in there on the joint. Whatever he had, I would have found it. But he had nothing, so I found nothing, and I burned him to a crisp. And he had a terrible time with me as a player because of that, because he didn't do his job. And I even sent him some material. I sent him like 3 NPCs and 1 location where I was from. Which is not as much as I usually would. I'd usually do at least 3 times that, but I knew he was not very good, so I wasn't even going to invest in him, because I expected him to be bad, so I didn't help him not be bad. But anyways, even, you know, a good player will give you those things to save you from burnout, but also a good player can burn you out worse than anyone. If you're not prepared beforehand. Now, if he had this stuff, we could hit the first city, just stayed there for 10 sessions, because it would take at least one session to go through each faction. So if he'd just done all that prep ahead of time, he would have had to do nothing while we were in that city for at least 4 sessions to meet all these cats. And then, it takes at least 4 more to explore them in detail and how do they feel about each other at the political web. So it was almost like a how not to GM was that guy. And he's a nice guy, and he learned a lot. I'm sure his next campaign is going to be way better. But he's pretty new as a GM. So that's one instance when I have burned someone out. Unfortunately, have you ever burned someone out, or can you think of anything else you want to add on under GM burnout?
I've probably burnt out one DM,
Yeah.
but it was the complete opposite of what you did.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, my character was so fundamentally non-dimensional that I just caused frustration throughout the entire party.
James will do that.
And that's why I mentioned sort of that laziness, because I've experienced that laziness. I didn't want to put the work into to design a character. I go to school and all that. It's my weekend. I'm gonna write in a book about an imaginary character that I'm gonna play. Of course I am. You have to. It's an imaginary character. It's made of nothing. And if you don't do any prep, you're gonna find that that's the position you're in. You're nothing, and everything around you doesn't make any sense.
Yeah, absolutely. I had another point, and I've lost it. It escaped from my brain.
Well, I want to talk about how important it is to know your players. Because you talked about how you developed a character that was a lore master. When I say know your players, I mean know their actual character, what their stats are, what their abilities to make saves are, what they can and can't do functionally. And then there's also the meta. What is your character looking for on a personal level to get from this campaign? Are they looking to hear a really interesting story? Do they want to kill a whole bunch of bad guys? Do they want sort of a tangible mix of those things? What do they want? And the easiest way to do that is just to ask your players. And if you do that, I think you'll find that you get a lot of information that you can use to develop a campaign. You can sort of introduce maybe a nefarious thieves guild if that's what they want to do, is join a thieves guild. If that was never mentioned before, you may have already had a thieves guild set up, but you may not have. It may have not been something that you thought of. And your imagination is very powerful, but it's only yours. If you start to contrast everybody's imaginations together, you'll get a beautiful story weave going on.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and that's one thing I've done in Return of the Runefangs. I know all the player characters are nobles. So I've developed the noble NPCs to a high degree. None of the player characters care about the temple, or the wizard tower, or the thieves guild, really. Or any other factions we have. They don't care about that. So those areas, I haven't detailed that much. I just haven't. And you know what? They haven't come up. No one's noticed they're not that detailed because that's not what they're here for anyway. So the areas they want to explore are highly detailed and they love it. But the areas they don't want to explore, they don't even know that they're not detailed. So I've saved myself burnout in game because I didn't have to make any nobles up on the fly. And out of game because I knew I didn't have to make NPCs for the temple, the thieves guild, the wizards cabal, like the orc tribe or guilds. I've done no work on guilds either. And like in our last campaign, it was the guilds were the most important element. Like they were the most highly detailed of all. But the players were different. In that campaign, the characters were more involved with the guild politics, where in this campaign, all the players are nobles. So again, pre-planning saves you so much from burnout. Just save yourself the energy and the effort. I think that's probably all I got to ramble about on burnout for right now.
Burned out?
I'm burned out on burnout.
I'm kind of burned out too.
Okay, excellent. You burned us out. I hope you're proud of yourself with your +2 sword. But I need to sign off now. Everybody have yourself a good day and you too win. Cheers.